Hey, I'm James from Smoking Dad Barbecue, and today we are doing a smoke test head-to-head with the Camp Chef Woodwind Pro versus the Kamado Joe Konnected Joe. Now, I started off my journey about 6 months ago with some of these Wi-Fi smart connected grills with the Masterbuilt Gravity series, the Kamado Joe Konnected Joe, and more recently the Camp Chef Woodwind Pro. In all of those videos, I shared my bias from the get-go is I am team analog and not a big fan of Wi-Fi connected grills. I don't like the idea of power. I don't love the sound of the humming here in the background, dealing with Wi-Fi issues, power outages, surges, or anything like that. But I have developed a soft spot for a feature that all of these grills have helped unlock over the past couple months, which is the long hot hold. I discovered the utility of this first with the Masterbuilt when I was out and away and my pulled pork roast hit the desired temperature, and I was able to remotely log in, turn the grill down to 150 degrees and keep that roast at a food safe temperature for hours. And I've played with this a bunch more on the Masterbuilt Gravity series, the Kamado Joe Konnected Joe, as well as the Camp Chef Woodwind Pro. And this has opened a small door of utility for me on the smart connected fan space where, frankly, I'm going to keep one of the fans that I'll be testing in a future video between the Flame Boss, the ThermoWorks signals and billows combination, as well as the Fireboard drive. So make sure you're subscribed when that video comes out. But I will be keeping a fan just for the utility that I've fallen in love with these different Wi-Fi smart connected grills. Now, speaking of grills, if we were to do just a grill mode comparison, this is not really a fair fight. The Kamado Joe Konnected Joe turns out amazing grilled results, whether I'm doing a steak over the hot coals, the rotisserie mode, the slow roller. I've done a whole bunch of tests. And so if you were comparing these two for a grill, there's a bunch of advantages stacked in the Kamado corner. But we're not doing that today. We are doing smoke, which is what turns out the best results on a low slow cook on something like a brisket. We've got the Camp Chef Woodwind Pro, which is burning pellets for fuel, and my experience in the past with any sort of pellet brisket is it comes out more on the pot roast side than a traditional smoked brisket. But Camp Chef's answer to this is the innovative smoke box, where we can open that up, add in wood chunks, and continue to add real wood smoke for flavor all day long. On my Kamado Joe, I started developing a method a couple years ago where I toss in some wood chips, pellets, or even wood chunks like I'm using today in the bottom ash drawer, and those burn throughout the duration of the cook. So it's a very similar idea where we have a drawer, we're adding a piece of wood, putting it in, and letting that smoke and increase the natural wood flavor that we're gonna get on our brisket. So to help find out which is the better smoker, I picked up two as close as possible briskets that I'll be smoking side by side to see which turns out the best low and slow brisket. There's other similarities here beyond the Wi-Fi connected smart grill category, which is also the price. Despite how much different the form factor is in terms of taking up more space, the Camp Chef Woodwind Pro is versus just looking at the Kamado Joe Konnected Joe, the usable grid space on these two much closer than what the eye would suggest from the outside. Even if I show you the cooking grid from the Konnected Joe inside of the Camp Chef is bigger. Square is bigger than round, but it is not that much, especially when I show you the two briskets in here. That's about the max capacity for each grill. There's not a really appreciable difference in terms of how much more capacity with things like ribs or brisket that we can cook in either one. And the price is not that different either. I mentioned, grill mode is stacked in the Kamado Joe's favor. In order to get a good steak on here, I needed to rely on the sidekick accessory. If I turn this up as hot as it will go and put a cast iron pan in and use my IR gun, I was seeing 300 degrees for temperature. So the only way I could sear a steak was to rely on the sidekick accessory, and it did a great job, but that puts the price almost neck and neck. Small advantage for Camp Chef on the price. We are $1,450 versus $1,600. But for that amount of difference, for 150 bucks, you can start thinking about the versatility. Pizza, steaks, rotisserie cooking, chicken, burgers, all those other things where you get a grill mode. I think that is a completely reasonable barrier to make up for a grill. But today is all about smoker. So let's get our briskets ready. I'll meet you over on the counter, show you how we're gonna prep and season our two briskets. But while we do that, why don't we fire up our two grills? Okay, I'm going to data log the startup procedure on both grills just to see how the two different algorithms cope with starting our fire. I'm going to place a piece of smoking wood right on the bottom of our Konnected Joe. cover that up with some fresh Fogo. Okay, just managing any high spots to make sure that charcoal's not coming up and sitting right against our deflectors. So there's about a finger's width gap all the way around. That looks good. Drop in our deflectors. Cooking grids. And I'll do probe number 1 here in the center of our Konnected Joe. Probe number 2 also in the center of our Camp Chef Woodwind. Add some of the same smoking wood into our smoke box here. Place that right down inside. Open the valve so that way the flames are coming up, hitting it. We can fire this up. Let's turn on the tracking probe on each. Power, automatic fire starter, and we're going to go for 270 degrees. Set our top vent. So our control tower top said very gentle open, so we're all set. Let's do the same on the Camp Chef. Set temp, also 270. Set our smoke, gonna go high, firm, perfect. Turn on our tracking probe. All right, let's go prep our brisket. Okay, I've got everything laid out to get to work. I picked 2 as even looking briskets in Costco as possible. They're both within $1 on price. The only difference is a left and a right-handed brisket, but we have very similar thickness on the thick end of the flat as well as the thin end, so we're not going to have too much of a variable, and pretty similar looking points, so we're not going to have to do a whole lot here just to get these evened out. So I've got my Dow Strong filleting knife. I'm going to get to work. That's going to make that really easy. And for our rub, I did a brisket head to head, and the most popular rub from a blind taste test was Black's. The second most popular was Franklin's. So I'm going to try mixing the two together. Black's is a little bit more salt forward. This rub, this is the spice rub without the salt, but this has a nice acidic kick, and it was the second most popular. So I'm going to see how these two blend together, but really what we're looking for today is just the smoke characteristics, not so much the seasoning. So I'll take you fast forward, get these out of the packaging, pat them dry, give them a quick and easy trim, as there's not too much that I need to do with these guys. I'm going to save any of the meat that I trim off for my burger grind, and any extra thick white fat, if we want, we can render that down for some tallow for future cooks. See you in a little bit. So on the top, you always feel bad sort of trimming this off, but when you save things for your burgers, it's really not a big deal. But this flap, especially on the offset where more of the air is rolling over, is going to burn. It's not as bad on a Kamado style cooker or even the Camp Chef Woodwind Pro, but I'm still going to trim this off since I like making burgers and I'm going to put this to good use. Same thing over here with our decal. This is just all hard fat and no meat in here, so we can get aggressive, and we're just trying to even out the surface. So this will break up either if I want to add it into the 80-20 grind or making tallow. This is really good for that. Okay, these two look pretty even for 2 different briskets, but let's get our rub on now. Start on the bottom, the Franklin Spice rub, presentation side, and we'll use any of the board rub just to help make sure we get all sides. Okay, we're going to leave these for about an hour while our pits come up to temperature, then we'll be ready to get them on. Okay, our Konnected Joe's up to temperature. Grab this probe out, get in our brisket. Looks good. I'll add a meter probe once we get the other one on. And our Camp Chef. Once again, pull off the probes. And you can see by the space that the brisket is taking up here, despite how much larger the Camp Chef Woodwind is, the 2 grilling areas are pretty similar. If I show you an overlay of fitting the Konnected Joe, which is an 18-inch grid inside the Woodwind Pro, you end up with a pretty similar usable space. This is bigger, but not as much as the outside dimensions would suggest. We've got about the equal amount of space on our flat and our point end. Let me get those meter probes. Okay, grab a probe. And I'm going to go right between the flat and the point end, just on a bit of an angle so I don't poke through. Right to the line, looks good. So probe number 1 was in the Woodwind Pro. Probe number 4 is going in the Konnected Joe. And I'm going to install in the exact same spot. Close that up. Check on our smoking wood situation here. Add that back. And we can do the same thing in our Konnected Joe, just removing the ash collector here. We see we've got some nice glowing embers. Drop in the same type of smoking wood. Close that back up. Okay, so we're still cruising along right at 270 degrees. Since I last saw you, I've started spraying with a mix of apple cider vinegar and water, about half and half each. And as the fat cap started to render and pool under the brisket, let me show you here, I just took a piece of smoking wood and placed that under here. This does a couple things. A, it helps the fat run off so that it's not pooling as badly down here and preventing us building from any bark. But it also gives us a chance to preheat these wood splits and dry them out so that if we did need to add more wood later on, that these will combust really quick. So now I'm going to transfer this to the foil boat. We're at about 170 degrees internal temperature. And the reason that I want to do that is this is not yet burnt to the point where we won't be able to slice through, but it's starting to get a little bit dark. And so this is still soft. If you can still push your finger in there, we are okay. But this is right about as far as I want to take that. So let's transfer it over to some tin foil and make a foil boat. And now we're going to lay flat for the rest of the cook. That looks good. Let's keep cooking. Same idea over here on our Camp Chef. So if I just move this, also had a piece of wood to help limit the amount of pooling. And we are getting a little bit dark on the bottom as well, particularly on this side. So we are also ready for the foil boat, as the flat cannot take too much more of that. So take it fast forward while we again get this in a boat. The boat is a great method for both of these cookers because the fire is directly under here. And even though we have a metal deflector and our ceramic plates, you can see we are starting to fight with some overdoneness on the bottom. I'm not using my double indirect on the Kamado to keep it as apples to apples between our two smokers, but the foil boat is a good way to protect against the bottom heat and make sure that we can still develop some bark on the top. Let's let both of our briskets keep cooking. Okay, let's take a look at our Konnected Joe brisket. Meter says we are there. I want to go now for probe feel, 201, and as you can see here, if I let that go, that is just sliding in with absolutely no resistance whatsoever. Let's check down on our flat. I'm pretty happy with that. I think we're done. So let's get this off, let it rest. Okay, we're about 30 minutes later or so, and once again I'm going to use my Chef's Temp Final Touch and just go for probe feel. So in our point end, not reading as high of a temperature, but this is what we want for probe feel. Down here in the flat, so we were 207 till we got to probe tender on our Konnected Joe. Here we are 206.9, 207. So we are the exact same temperature, and again getting that probe feel like room temperature butter. So this I think is good. So the game plan now, I'm going to get this off, let it rest. It's about 30 minutes behind, so I'm going to give them both an hour to rest before I do our taste test. So there is no difference between the rest really informing the results. We'll just be able to focus on the smoke, the bark, the taste, and see which is the better smoker. I'll get this off. Well, a few hours go slower than when you're waiting for a brisket to rest. And if I show you a clip here, Bella thinks the same as she's just hiding out in the back, waiting for when she can dive in and take a bite of one of these two briskets. But I think our hour is up. It's time to slice in and see how we did. Okay, so I've tried to rally up a couple taste testers to help so you know which is which. This is probe 4, which is our Konnected Joe. So we'll place that here. So my right, your left, this is the Kamado Joe. And probe number 1, which is the Camp Chef Woodwind, is on my left, your right. So we'll leave these here so we know which is which. No one else will know, but let me get a couple of slices out of each. So let's grab a Dow Strong slicer, get a couple slices out of each. We'll dive in for our taste test. Don't want to squeeze that all out, but that looks lovely. Get a couple slices here from our flat. So holding up on its own, flopping, still really hot. And just the slightest pull and that just comes right apart. So I think this is going to be good. Let's slice into our second brisket. Noticing right away a little bit of a difference in the smoke ring between the two, so a little bit less pronounced. But again, that just looks really good. Don't want to squeeze all that out. Let's get a couple slices. Again, holding up, Not quite as tender. I did cut that a little bit too thick, but the slightest pull, and that again still is coming apart really easy. Let's get these ready for our taste test. So you're rolling, so go ahead. Which one do you like the smoke better?
This one.
Yeah?
I actually really enjoy this. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks. All right, help yourself.
I think this has better smoke on it.
Yeah? Awesome. Up to standard?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Awesome, thanks. Go for it.
All right.
From the point.
From the point?
Yeah, I cut bite-sized pieces.
That one's good. It's a little smoky. I prefer this one.
Yeah? All right, thanks.
But if you like smoke.
Yep, pellet grill. Yep. All right, my turn. So I obviously know which these are, but our guest didn't. Those two rubs mixed together versus recently, very good. I like that. So I'm not surprised why Sarah likes this one. I always talk about smoke profile. Very mild on smoke. I'm going for the smoke here. Let's do a quick recap. So as always, super insightful when you are able to compare these things side by side and actually appreciate some of the differences. Now, I will say, to be fair to the Camp Chef, this is much better than I recall for something like my Kamado Joe Pellet Joe, which I called Grandma's pot roast in terms of flavor. This does not taste like pot roast. It at least tastes like brisket. It just comes in really on the mild side of almost barely the minimum of acceptable smoke flavor. And as you hear, Sarah, she's always likes mild, gentle smoke. The offset she likes, pellet grill she likes, and it's too easy to get carried away in a Kamado smoke. So for her and anyone like her, this is right on point for a mild, gentle, clean smoke. For me and sort of 75% of everyone who tested it today, the Kamado Joe Konnected Joe with the wood chunks in the drawer supplementing it, this just imparts more of a smoke flavor. Maybe it's because we're using charcoal for our fuel versus pellets for fuel. Charcoal is, after all, wood that's just been carbonized, and so we're getting much more wood flavor out of the Konnected Joe versus what I'm getting out of the Pellet Joe. And pellets, as much as you may try different varieties and flavors, compressed sawdust just doesn't impart as much flavor as charcoal, which is real wood, or real wood for smoke flavor, or especially if I go to something like my offsets where we're using wood for flavor as well as wood for heat. And that's the nirvana, the best of the best with smoke, and it gets clean as well when we do it that way. So, kind of a quick recap today. In terms of where we started off, we mentioned if it was going to be a head-to-head grill comparison, the cards are really stacked on Team Kamado here. It just does grilling things much better than what the Camp Chef does, but I'm surprised that it was a 75% in favor of Kamado for smoke over the Camp Chef Woodwind here. So I'm going to give the win to the Kamado Joe Konnected Joe. So this is end of the line for the Camp Chef Woodwind, mostly just because of space, but I want to thank Camp Chef for sending this grill out in the first place. They asked, hey, would you mind testing it and maybe do a video? And I didn't need another grill. As you can tell, I have plenty around here, but there was a charity in town that I knew was looking for a new grill. And so when I asked, hey, do you mind if I do a video, even though we ended up doing several, if I pay it forward and give it on to a charity who's sometimes even reheating some of the food that we donate and or making their own for members of the community, they said, absolutely. So very thankful to Camp Chef and team for providing the grill, making this happen, and more importantly, getting it to a family who's going to continue to get lots of use out of that, serving the community around me. That's it for today. I'm James from Smoking Head Barbecue signing off, but before you go, if you want to hang out and ask any questions, I go live once a month with members, so be sure to check out the details down below. That's it for today. Don't be afraid to fire it up.